100 years had passed since Hannibal's war, but Rome still could not forget. The memory of Cannae, the burning villages, the fear that once gripped Italy. All of it lingered like a wound that never healed. Carthage had been defeated at Zama, stripped of its empire, forced to pay crushing tribute. Yet somehow the city survived. It rebuilt its walls, reopened its harbors, and grew rich again through trade. To the Romans, that was unforgivable. Carthage was supposed to be broken, humbled forever. Instead, its markets were full, its ships busy, and its people proud. The Senate in Rome watched uneasily as the city they thought dead began to breathe again. Among the senators was one man who could not let it go, Marcus Porcius Cato, called Cato the Elder. Every time he stood to speak in the Senate, no matter what the topic was, taxes, laws, or grain shipments, he ended with the same chilling words, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. First some laughed. Carthage was weak, they said. It had no army, no navy, and no allies. But Cato had seen the city himself. He had walked through its rebuilt streets, seen its wealth, and smelled the arrogance of its merchants. To him, Carthage was not just a rival, it was a disease. If Rome allowed it to live, it would rise again. The tension built slowly. Rome's allies in North Africa began sending reports. Carthage was stockpiling grain, repairing its walls, even training young men in secret. The peace treaty forbade them from raising an army without Roman approval, but desperation makes men bold. Then came the spark. Numidia, a nearby kingdom under Rome's protection, attacked Carthaginian lands. Rome expected Carthage to plead for help. Instead, the city fought back without permission. To the Senate, this was open rebellion. Cato's words finally found their moment. The Senate roared in agreement. The decision was made. Rome would return to Africa. But this time, there would be no peace, no negotiations, no mercy. As the fleets assembled, the world watched in silence. Rome was no longer the republic that had once feared Hannibal's genius. It was now the master of the Mediterranean, hardened, ruthless, and proud. The soldiers boarding those ships did not come to conquer. They came to erase. Across the sea, the people of Carthage prepared for the impossible. They knew Rome was coming, and they knew what that meant. The old men remembered Zama. The young men swore oaths on the altars. The city that once ruled the western Mediterranean now faced extinction. The Third Punic War had begun, and this time Rome intended to finish it. The Roman fleet appeared on the horizon like a moving wall of iron. Hundreds of ships stretched across the blue African waters, their red sails glowing under the sun. The citizens of Carthage climbed the city's tall walls and watched in horror. For 100 years, the people had prayed this day would never come. Now it had arrived. The Roman legions landed swiftly and efficiently, forming ranks on the beaches outside the city. Their commander was Scipio Aemilianus, the adopted grandson of the great Scipio Africanus who had defeated Hannibal. Young but brilliant, Aemilianus carried not only the name of his ancestor but his same calm determination. For him, this war was more than conquest. It was destiny. Rome would end what his family had begun. Carthage, meanwhile, was unprepared. The city had not seen war in generations. Its army was gone, its navy dismantled. Desperate citizens began forging weapons out of anything they could find. Kitchen knives, farming tools, even temple ornaments. Women cut their hair to twist into ropes for catapults. Children carried stones to the walls. Priests blessed jars of oil to pour on the heads of Roman soldiers climbing the battlements. Rome demanded surrender. Carthage offered gold, hostages, and promises, but Scipio wanted more. He delivered the Senate's message. The people of Carthage must abandon their city, move 10 miles inland, burn it themselves. The city erupted in disbelief. Leave Carthage? The sacred harbors, the temples of Baal, the graves of their ancestors? To the Carthaginians, such a demand was worse than death. They refused. Scipio gave the order. The siege began. Rome surrounded Carthage from land and sea. Siege towers rolled across the plains, massive engines of destruction that hurled stones heavier than men. From the walls, Carthaginian defenders answered with fire, arrows, and desperate courage. The Roman assault met resistance so fierce that even Scipio was astonished. For months, neither side yielded. Roman soldiers tried to storm the walls, but Carthaginian defenders fought like demons. When the Romans built siege ramps, the defenders set them ablaze. When the Romans cut off food supplies, the Carthaginians dug tunnels to bring grain into the city. Every day, the streets echoed with the clash of iron and the cries of the wounded. Inside the city, hunger spread. The once great markets were empty, and people began eating whatever they could find. Rats, leather, even the bodies of dead animals. Yet still, no one surrendered. Carthage was fighting for its soul. Scipio understood something few Roman commanders did. Destruction would take time. He ordered the construction of a massive wall to encircle the entire city, cutting off all escape and hope. The wall was 20 miles long, a prison of stone for the greatest city of the ancient world. Even as starvation spread, Carthage refused to bow. The people forged new weapons from the ruins of their own homes. Every night, fires lit the skyline, not from celebration, but from forges turning iron gates into swords. By now, Scipio realized that Rome was not facing a city, it was facing a spirit. Every man, woman, and child had become a soldier. Carthage had no chance to win, but it had chosen to die standing. From his command tent, Scipio looked at the burning skyline and murmured to his officers, "They fight as if the gods themselves will save them." But the gods were silent, and the storm of Rome had only just begun. The siege dragged into its second year. Carthage, once a jewel of the Mediterranean, had turned into a scar, black smoke rising day and night, the cries of battle echoing through the narrow streets. Yet the city still stood. Scipio Aemilianus grew restless. Every Roman assault met with brutal resistance. The defenders, though starving, seemed to fight harder with each passing day. They poured fire on ladders, rolled boulders from rooftops, and ambushed Roman soldiers in alleys so tight that even shields were useless. But Scipio was patient. He knew Carthage could not hold forever. One night, under the cover of darkness, his engineers began building a massive assault ramp leading straight to the city walls. The work went on for weeks, hidden behind lines of shields and curtains of smoke. When the time came, the Romans attacked with everything they had. Siege engines thundered. Archers darkened the sky. A wall that had stood for centuries began to crumble under the rain of stones. The ground shook as the great towers fell. And finally, with a deafening crash, a section of the outer wall collapsed. The Roman army roared. Trumpets blared. Thousands of soldiers poured through the breach. But what waited inside was not surrender. It was hell. Carthaginian defenders met them with desperate fury. Every street became a battlefield. Romans fought from house to house, kicking down doors, finding archers hidden in upper floors. Women hurled tiles and boiling oil from rooftops. Old men stabbed from doorways with spears made from broken furniture. Scipio advanced slowly, step by step, turning victory into annihilation. His orders were precise. Every house cleared, every tower destroyed. Behind the legions came teams of engineers setting fire to captured blocks so the enemy could never retake them. By the fifth day, half the city was gone. Smoke covered the sun. The harbors were choked with wreckage and bodies. Still, Carthage refused to fall. The surviving defenders retreated toward the Bursa, the city's high citadel, the sacred heart of Carthage. There, thousands gathered, soldiers, priests, women, and children. They built barricades of stone and wood, waiting for the final assault. The temple of Eshmun, god of healing, became their last fortress. From below, Scipio watched the flames crawl up the walls. He could have ended it with fire, but he chose the slow way to make the world watch Carthage die piece by piece. That night, as the wind carried the smell of burning cedar and flesh, even the Roman soldiers grew silent. They had seen many wars, but nothing like this. Carthage was dying, but it was dying with its head held high. The morning the Romans breached the Bursa, the sky over Carthage turned red with smoke. The wind carried the smell of ash and death across the harbor. For 600 years, this city had stood as the pride of Africa. Now it was nothing but a dying flame. Scipio Aemilianus gave the order to advance. The final assault had begun. The Roman legions moved like a machine, shield to shield, up the steep streets leading to the citadel. Every step met resistance. Carthaginian archers fired from rooftops, while desperate men hurled spears made from shattered temple columns. But hunger and exhaustion had broken them. Their arrows fell short, their arms too weak to draw the bowstring. As the Romans climbed higher, the defenders were pushed into the inner courtyards. The sound of fighting echoed off stone walls. The screams of the wounded, the crash of collapsing roofs, the roar of fire. At the top of the hill stood the great temple of Eshmun, its white pillars stained with soot, its bronze doors scorched by flame. Inside, hundreds of citizens had gathered. Families, priests, soldiers, and nobles, all waiting for the end. The high priest raised his hands to the gods one last time, but even the sacred air smelled of smoke. Outside, Hasdrubal, the Carthaginian commander, finally realized the truth. The city could no longer be saved. He rode down through the chaos, his armor blackened, and surrendered to Scipio. The Roman general accepted his submission with cold silence. He had no joy in it, only duty. But inside the temple, Hasdrubal's wife watched from the doorway. She saw her husband kneel before the Romans, begging for mercy. Her face twisted in fury and despair. She turned to the people behind her, the mothers clutching their children, the priests chanting the old hymns, and spoke in a voice loud enough to rise over the flames. "Rome has conquered his body," she said, "but not his soul. Better to die free than live as slaves." She took her children in her arms, looked toward the burning city, and stepped into the fire. One by one, others followed. Within moments, the temple became an inferno, flames shooting high into the sky. Roman soldiers, watching from below, froze in silence. The sight was too much even for men hardened by years of war. Some said later that the fire burned so bright, it turned the night into day. When Hasdrubal saw what his wife had done, he fell to his knees and covered his face. He had chosen life, but his family had chosen freedom. The battle was over, but the horror had only begun. Scipio ordered the city burned completely. His soldiers moved block by block, setting fire to every home, every temple, every market. The heat was so intense that stones cracked and melted. The once mighty harbors, where Carthaginian ships had ruled the Mediterranean, boiled with smoke and flame. For 6 days and nights, Carthage burned. The sky stayed dark even at noon. Thousands died in the flames. Thousands more were taken as slaves. Those who survived the fires were chained and marched to the ships waiting offshore. When it was done, Scipio climbed the walls of the ruined citadel and looked down upon the ashes of the city that had once defied Rome. An officer beside him whispered, "At last, Carthage is gone." But Scipio said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the flames. After a long silence, he murmured words from Homer, a line about the fall of Troy. "There will come a day when Rome shall fall, as Carthage has fallen." His men heard him but did not answer. The fire roared on. When the last flame of Carthage finally died, there was nothing left but silence. The city that had once been the heart of trade, art, and power in the western Mediterranean was gone. The proud walls that had stood for centuries were now blackened ruins. The streets were unrecognizable. Only ashes, twisted metal, and scattered bones remained. Scipio Aemilianus walked through the destruction with slow steps. His armor was covered in soot, his eyes red from smoke. Around him, the victorious legions moved through the rubble, gathering loot and herding prisoners. The smell of burning stone and flesh hung heavy in the air. For years, Rome had dreamed of this moment, the total erasure of its greatest rival. And now, standing in the ashes, Scipio realized that dreams fulfilled do not always bring joy. He climbed what remained of the citadel and looked over the dead city. Slaves cried out as Roman soldiers chained them. Statues of Carthaginian gods lay shattered, their faces melted by fire. The harbor, once filled with ships, was now a boiling graveyard. The Senate's orders were clear. Carthage was never to rise again. Every building was to be leveled. Every survivor sold into slavery. And the land itself, the soil of Carthage, was to be cursed. Roman soldiers carried out the ritual with grim precision. They plowed salt into the earth so that nothing would ever grow there again. The fields that had once fed an empire were left barren forever. Messengers carried news back to Rome. Carthage is destroyed. The city erupted in celebration. Bells rang. Senators declared Scipio a hero. The people rejoiced as if a shadow had been lifted from their world. But Scipio did not celebrate. He knew what had been lost. Carthage had been an enemy, yes, but also a mirror. It had shown Rome what power, innovation, and courage looked like. By destroying it completely, Rome had killed something of itself. In the years that followed, Carthage became a legend, a warning whispered in marble halls. Roman generals would point to its ashes and remind their soldiers, "This is what happens to those who challenge us." Yet even as Rome grew into the empire it had always dreamed of, the ghost of Carthage never vanished. Some said that at night, when the winds blew from Africa, one could still hear the faint sound of the city burning, the screams of its people carried across the sea. Cato the Elder had once demanded, "Carthage must be destroyed." His wish had come true. But history has a cruel sense of irony. For in destroying Carthage, Rome had planted the first seeds of its own fall, arrogance, greed, and the belief that no one could ever rival it again. Years later, when the empire began to crumble, many remembered Scipio's words on the walls of Carthage. "There will come a day when Rome shall fall, as Carthage has fallen." Time proved him right. But in that final moment, when Carthage turned to dust and the world watched Rome rise alone, a new age began. The age of empire, born from fire. The Mediterranean belonged to Rome now. Its ships ruled the waves. Its armies walked unchallenged across continents. But in the heart of every Roman who had seen Carthage burn, there lingered a quiet understanding. Victory built on ashes is never pure. As the last embers faded and the sea winds carried the smoke away, the world turned a new page. Carthage was gone, but its story of pride, brilliance, and defiance would live forever. And so would the warning, every empire that forgets mercy eventually meets its own Carthage.